a Mafia collector stepped into Harlem with a list of names. He never made it back downtown. By morning, the word had spread from Lenox Avenue to 125th Street. Someone had drawn a line, and the Mafia had crossed it. This wasn't a street scuffle. It wasn't a random beating. It was a warning, because Harlem had a protector. A quiet man in sharp suits, a man who read Shakespeare in the morning and ran an empire by night. His name was Bumpy Johnson, and when the Mafia tried to take Harlem's underground fortune, they didn't expect resistance. They got war. A secret war that would reshape New York's criminal underworld forever. In the 1930s and 40s, Harlem wasn't just music and neon lights. It was cash. Real cash. Every morning, numbers runners moved through the neighborhood like clockwork. They collected tiny bets from factory workers, barbers, maids, waiters, pennies, nickels, dimes, but multiplied across thousands of people, it became millions. The numbers racket wasn't flashy, it was steady, reliable, community-based. Money flowed from brownstone kitchens to policy banks hidden behind storefronts. And unlike downtown rackets, much of it stayed in Harlem. Families ate because of it. Businesses survived because of it. Power grew because of it. And power always attracts attention. Downtown, the Mafia was watching. They controlled gambling. They controlled unions. They controlled docks and trucking routes. But Harlem was different. It was independent. And independence doesn't last long in a city ruled by organized crime. Bumpy Johnson wasn't loud. He didn't shout. He didn't brag. He observed. Short, stocky, always composed. He had earned his place under the legendary Stephanie St. Clair, the queen of policy. She taught him discipline. She taught him patience. She taught him that Harlem belonged to Harlem, not to downtown, not to Little Italy. Bumpy absorbed it all. He studied strategy, read philosophy, memorized poetry, but when violence was necessary, he didn't hesitate. He understood something simple. Control isn't about noise, it's about leverage. And Harlem trusted him. That trust was his real weapon. By the late 1930s, the American Mafia had reorganized under men like Charles "Lucky" Luciano. The five families divided New York like a board game. Territories, percentages, tribute. They preferred order. Harlem's independence disrupted that order, so they approached politely. First came offers, partnership, protection, which meant one thing: pay up. Bumpy listened, calm, respectful. Then he refused, not loudly, not recklessly, just firmly. And that refusal echoed downtown. Because if Harlem stayed independent, others might follow. The first response wasn't a massacre, it was pressure. Numbers runners got stopped. Collectors got threatened. Storefronts were vandalized. Men in tailored suits walked into Harlem shops and demanded a cut. One night, a trusted policy banker was beaten in an alley. Another was shot outside his building. No headlines, no public statements, just whispers. Harlem felt the shift. The music in the clubs grew tense. Eyes lingered on unfamiliar faces, and Bumpy watched. He didn't rush into chaos. He gathered information. Harlem fed him everything. Every strange car, every downtown visitor, every threat. The Mafia had power, but they didn't have the neighborhood. And in Harlem, that mattered. The Mafia expected submission. Instead, they got resistance. A collector sent to enforce tribute was cornered. He left shaken, humiliated. Word traveled fast. Downtown meetings turned heated. Some capos demanded retaliation. Crush Harlem. Make an example. Others warned against a street war. Harlem wasn't just another block. It was densely connected, unified. And Bumpy wasn't reckless. He didn't fire first. He responded, calculated, strategic. For every act of intimidation, he delivered a controlled message. You can enter, but you won't control. One spark could ignite it. Then Bumpy did something unexpected. He went above the street captains, above the collectors. He reached toward the leadership, toward men like Beto Genovese. Genovese respected strength. Respected revenue. Respected men who didn't fold. A meeting was arranged. Dim room, smoke hanging heavy, no shouting. Just calculation. Bumpy offered a compromise. Harlem stays under his control. A percentage flows downtown. No public humiliation. No chaos. Just business. For the Mafia, it was pragmatic. Total domination would cost blood. This would cost pride. Money decided. An agreement formed. Quiet. Unofficial. But real. The war didn't explode. It sank underground. For years it worked. Collectors moved safely. Tribute was paid. Harlem thrived under Bumpy's rule. He expanded operations, maintained order, settled disputes before they became disasters. Downtown got its cut. But peace and organized crime is never permanent. It's transactional. And it depends on personalities. Younger Mafia figures resented the arrangement. They didn't like that Harlem had negotiated. They didn't like that Bumpy had forced respect. And outside forces were beginning to close in. By the 1950s, federal authorities intensified their focus on organized crime. Surveillance increased. Indictments followed. Names that once operated in silence began appearing in courtrooms. Bumpy wasn't immune. He served prison time. Each sentence created instability. Each absence invited ambition. While he sat behind bars, new players tested Harlem's edges. The Mafia watched carefully, waiting. Because power vacuums are opportunities. When Bumpy returned, the streets had changed. New drugs, more desperation, less patience. The delicate balance felt thinner. The 1960s transformed New York. Civil rights movements surged. Urban tension grew. Police scrutiny intensified. The old handshake agreements felt fragile in a modernizing city. Bumpy still commanded respect. But age and prison time take their toll. Younger men wanted faster money, riskier ventures. The heroin trade crept deeper into Harlem. And with narcotics came violence. The Mafia saw opportunity again. Because narcotics meant enormous profit, and enormous profit attracts control. The Quiet War never truly ended. It simply shifted forms. In 1968, Bumpy Johnson sat inside Wells' restaurant in Harlem. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't paranoid. He was where he always belonged, in his neighborhood. He finished his meal, spoke calmly, then collapsed. A heart attack. Not bullets, not betrayal, just silence. For Harlem, it felt unreal. A king had died peacefully. But peace doesn't protect a kingdom once the king is gone. Without Bumpy, the balance collapsed. No single figure held the same authority. The Mafia's influence expanded quietly. Narcotics surged. Violence escalated. The streets grew less controlled, less unified. The agreement that once kept Harlem stable dissolved into competition. Because what Bumpy had built wasn't just an empire, it was a personality-driven equilibrium. And equilibrium rarely survives succession. Did Bumpy win? He forced the Mafia to negotiate. He protected Harlem's autonomy for decades. He proved that control wasn't absolute, but his victory was temporary. Because organized crime adapts. It waits. It studies. And when conditions change, it moves. After his death, Harlem entered a new era. An era defined not by negotiation, but by explosion. There was a young man watching all of this, learning, observing, understanding where Bumpy succeeded and where he compromised. That man would rise in the vacuum. And unlike Bumpy, he wouldn't negotiate percentages. He would chase dominance. His name was Frank Lucas. And if you thought the hidden war between Harlem and the Mafia was intense, the next chapter would be louder, bloodier, and impossible to keep secret. Because sometimes a quiet war is only the beginning. The real storm comes after. Stay tuned.